Hello again, dudes and dudettes. Welcome back to I'm the Dude Games. So, today is Sunday, May 5th, 2019. As promised, I said that I would do a full spoiler-filled review of Avengers Endgame. And I've seen the movie twice. First time I saw it with my fiance. Second time I saw it in 3D by myself. Both times I was just as emotionally impacted. When the superhero movie, genre, first started really becoming a big thing. Like, I'm trying to remember, because, there were, old superhero shows, back in the day, very old, with DC Comics, with, the old Batman TV show, and then Wonder Woman and all that, and there were just old iterations, the Incredible Hulk and stuff like that. But, comic book movies didn't really start getting big until I think the X-Men movies and then the Tobey Maguire Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. By the way, I apologize if my glasses are crooked. It's one of the many things I have to get fixed. But I just wanted to give you guys my full run through of the movie, how I interpreted it, what I understood from it, and what I think of it. In 2008, the first Iron Man movie debuted, and it was such a smashing success. It came out after the Transformers movies. It came out after, I think, the first or second Transformers movie. And already you could kind of see some similarities. Like when Tony first puts on his Mark II armor, he does a surface test of the armor, and you can kind of see shifting and transforming plates, metal plating and all that stuff. And it was kind of reminiscent a little bit of some of the visual effects of Transformers. But at the same time, it's they nailed his origin story for one. Overall, I don't think the directors and the creators of that movie expected it to go as well as it did. But Robert Downey Jr. is just such a phenomenal actor, and because, he is who he is, and because he's as good as he is, and they made him look exactly like what you would picture Tony Stark in the comics. He looks exactly like Tony Stark in the comics. And they just did such a phenomenal job with casting that that first Iron Man movie laid the groundwork. It laid the foundation for what the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe would become. And then after that, The Incredible Hulk followed. Now, there was a Hulk movie with Eric Bana, Jennifer Connelly, and Sam Elliott, directed by Ang Lee, that came out before The Incredible Hulk and long before Iron Man. It was okay. It can't really be tied into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Incredible Hulk can, and even though they recast Bruce Banner for the Avengers movies, I still have to give props to Edward Norton. He plays a very good Bruce Banner. He's a great actor. He did bring that character. He did bring something to the role of Bruce Banner in The Incredible Hulk, and really, Bruce Banner is kind of he's highly intelligent, but he's a skinnier, somewhat toned but skinny, kind of lanky guy. He looks like a science nerd. He looks like he belongs in a lab. And Edward Norton just has the body build of that character. But then to see him transform into such a muscle-bound rage monster with such ferocity, like the action sequences in The Incredible Hulk were some of the most intense action sequences that I have ever seen in a movie, that I had ever seen in a movie up until that point. But they did do a great job with that. A lot of people talk crap about The Incredible Hulk, but I think it was pretty solidly done. In my opinion, I think the worst MCU movie was probably Iron Man 3. As a movie, it was entertaining enough, but I felt like RDJ had to practically carry that whole movie. They completely messed up the plot. They completely messed up the Mandarin. I thought Iron Man 2 was better than Iron Man 3. That's just my opinion. Although in Iron Man 2, you really didn't care too much about the backstory or the history between him and Ivan Vanko, a.k.a. Whiplash. They were kind of really trying to reach for some obscure Iron Man villains there. But I just did not like what they did, how they spun the whole Mandarin plot in Iron Man 3. I did not like it at all. To me, that's the worst MCU movie. Even worse than Thor and Thor 2, but even the Thor movie, both Thor movies before Ragnarok, were more solid and a little bit more grounded in their story and their character. But yeah, that first Iron Man movie really laid the foundation for what the rest of the MCU would become. And over the next 10 years, so much has been accomplished and so many characters have been introduced. Me personally, like, if I had to pick, like, a top 5 best MCU movies, I would probably have to say the very first Avengers movie was one of the absolute best. That belongs in the top 5. It was done so well. The character development, the clashing of all those characters and all those egos in one movie. Just to see that, to see their interactions and the action sequences, the banter back and forth between all of them was so sublime. Now, at the time, there were still certain things I didn't know about Marvel Comics, and certain characters that I hadn't quite become familiar with yet. So, that, and I hadn't also quite gotten used to the trend of these Marvel movies were always going to have mid and end credit sequences that kind of tie into the next movie or what's going to happen next in the MCU. So I didn't see, the first time I watched Avengers, I didn't see the end credit sequence, the mid credit sequence with Thanos, when they first introduced the fact that Thanos was going to be a player in this series that they were starting. But anyway, as far as like my top 5 favorite Avengers movies, I'd probably say, obviously the first Avengers movie. I love the first Captain America movie. The Captain America trilogy is one that they just nailed. They absolutely nailed it. And Chris Evans, first of all, don't get me started on his beard in Infinity War, because that just makes him infinitely sexier. But Chris Evans absolutely nails the role. And Captain America is so fucking true and so pure of heart, and he's a natural born leader. And all he ever wanted to do was good. So, and obviously the super soldier serum amplified every characteristic about him, and it got rid of all his health issues, and it buffed him the fuck up. So, first Captain America movie was absolutely solid, but then after the first Avengers movie, in Captain America Winter Soldier, to me that's like number 2, tied for number 1 in the top 5 best MCU movies, because like I can't believe they got Robert Redford to play in that movie, and he's like an acting legend. He really is. He's one of the best. He does a really good job at playing Secretary Pierce. But in that movie, I was taken on such an intellectual and almost like action political thriller kind of ride, because it's like all of this like shadow stuff is happening in the background. It's like you can tell something's fishy, you can tell something's up, but you can't quite put your finger on it until Black Widow and Steve discover that underground Hydra bunker inside the old original S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters, and they discover that Zola had been computerized and that Hydra had survived, growing inside S.H.I.E.L.D. as a shadow organization. I'm like, wow. Because all this time, it's like S.H.I.E.L.D. is now manhunting Captain America, and I'm like, I know Cap. And from what I know from Cap, he would not do anything. He wouldn't be running away from these people without a reason. And he always has a damn good reason for everything he does. So I knew that something had to be up. And then when that was revealed, I'm just like fucking mind blown, That and the tension between him and Bucky when he realized that Bucky had survived and that he became the Winter Soldier. And then the conflict between those two, the conflict within Steve, oh my god, kick it. He looked like a kicked puppy. I just wanted to give him a hug. And then just the conflict, and then the relationship after the fact between him and Bucky, just throughout the entire MCU after that, just really tugs on your heartstrings. So I think first Avengers movie, Captain America: Winter Soldier. I think the third best would obviously have to be Endgame, then Infinity War, and then probably Captain America: Civil War. In my opinion, and all the MCU movies have their place, and they're all entertaining. Some more than others. Obviously, some of them are better movies overall than others as far as their storytelling, their plot, and character development. There are some honorable mentions. Thor Ragnarok, as well as I think Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is probably an honorable mention. Captain Marvel's pretty solid. I didn't really want to pay attention or even get involved in the whole feminism stuff that was circulating with Brie Larson. I don't know the whole situation with that. I don't know. It seemed like she was just trying to push a lot of stuff down people's throats and just throwing her unpopular opinions, or just the way she was kind of trying to push her beliefs on people, I think just turned a lot of people off of her character and the movie. But that's not to say Captain Marvel wasn't a good movie. It is. It was, but I think she was trying to push too much feminism onto people with it. And it was like the MCU trying to make an attempt to make their version of Wonder Woman. And Wonder Woman was a phenomenal movie, and Wonder Woman herself just oozes female empowerment. I mean, it just goes with her character. And that's probably the best DC movie that will ever be made, ever. They did it so phenomenally well, but with DC has been trying to copy Marvel as far as their movie franchises for years, and they're just failing, in my opinion. And I'm sure a lot of people probably agree with me with that. So those are some of my opening opinions on the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how well that they've introduced and developed all these characters in this 10-year plot leading up to the unification of the Infinity Stones by Thanos in the Infinity Gauntlet, because he's on his mission. And that was the thing. That was the thing that shocked me so much about Infinity War, was the fact that, in a way, it wasn't really an Avengers movie, was it? The Avengers weren't the heroes because they were already scattered and divided and worrying about their own survival and their own lives for once, because of these Sokovia Accords in the aftermath of Phase 2 and Age of Ultron. The Sokovia Accords was the MCU's version of the Superhuman Registration Act, meaning beings of significant power, basically the Avengers and any beings of significant ability or power were forced to sign ratified, notarized documents vowing to be deployed into areas and situations under the control of a United Nations panel of judges. And it's like, obviously Cap would not go along with that because it's surrendering your freedom of choice for one. And it's like, if he were president, that's like him, honoring to protect the Constitution of the United States. But, for obvious reasons, that really put a dividing line between the Avengers as it did in the comics. And Thanos really did pick his moment in Infinity War. Like, seriously, like, after the fact, it's like Asgard is destroyed in Ragnarok. The Avengers are scattered, divided, broken up. Some of the most other powerful entities in the universe have been lost or destroyed or killed. Thanos really did pick his moment to strike. He was playing a very intricate game, and he picked his moment, and he succeeded. Because Thanos ultimately was the hero in his own right in Infinity War. As morally fucked up and wrong, but also kind of right as he was, like, every single time someone, some entity, some evil being with their own agendas has tried to take on the Avengers at their best, anytime someone has tried to go toe-to-toe with them when they're at their best, they always win. Because the Avengers are the last line of defense of Earth and the rest of the galaxy. They are the last line of defense. And anytime someone tries to beat them at their best, they lose. Loki lost, and so did Ultron. But Thanos wasn't deliberately trying to kill them. He wasn't deliberately trying to destroy them. He wasn't deliberately trying to destroy Earth. His mission was to wipe out half of all life across the entire universe. To give the universe a fresh start, as it were. The universe's resources are finite, and population growing out of control across the universe, especially on Earth. He sees planets dying, he sees chaos and disorder and disruption, and the more life creates, the more gets consumed, and it's just a natural way of life. It's a very existential way of looking at things, but it's a cold hard truth of life. The more life creates, the more we take in and consume in order to survive. Now, personally, it depends on what you believe. I don't know if there's other intelligent life out there other than Earth. We don't know yet. I'd like to believe that somewhere in this endless universe, there has to be other intelligent life somewhere. But we as human beings exist here on Earth, and this is the world that we have created for ourselves. This world was here. We just live in it. And this is the world that mankind has created for ourselves to live in. All of us, And so the fact that Thanos was on his own mission and a hero in his own right, in his own mind, and the Avengers were scattered and broken up and not fighting at their best because they weren't unified in any way, that's why Thanos won. And they had already lost so many, and all of the Avengers had already lost so many loved ones, people they cared about, had suffered some kind of devastating mental and emotional trauma, especially Tony, because after the first Avengers movie, and especially Age of Ultron, both the situation that Thanos had kind of created in Tony's mind. Tony almost died in the first Avengers movie trying to fight back Thanos' forces that were being led by Loki, but the Mind Stone was used to manipulate Tony's mind, and it struck so much fear in him that, he just could not cope. For so long, he just could not cope. So he's constantly whittling himself away, working day and night, pouring his very blood, sweat, and tears into ways to making sure that the Earth will always be defended, that everything will continue to spin on, and it takes such a toll on him. And as soon as he hears about Thanos, he's like, this is it. This is the motherfucker I've been waiting for. This is the guy I've been waiting to fucking kill, because I've had it. He is done. But obviously, like the rest of them, he doesn't know what they're walking into. And when they try to beat Thanos at his game, it just does not work. And he'll stop at nothing. And so I think that was the thing that shocked people the most about Infinity War. And there was so much to try to understand and comprehend after the fact and after the snap that wiped out half of all life and half of the heroes in the Avengers. And I gotta tell you, I don't think I'm alone in saying that I cried pretty hard. Mainly because I'm such a huge Spider-Man fan. When I saw Peter fade to ash, I wept like a baby. That was really fucking hard. I couldn't cope. I could not cope after Infinity War. I just couldn't. And I know this is all fiction, but it's like these characters have been around in comics for years, and the creators of these characters, Stan Lee and and everyone else behind Marvel Comics and behind all these characters, have made them not only so extraordinary, but also each and every one of these Marvel characters is very grounded and very realistic and very relatable. It's like putting television in people's homes. You put these people in people's homes and their hearts and minds. You bring these people and their gifts, their talent, their entertainment to people. It's like having that person with you there in your home. It really is. And they bring these characters to life so well on the big screen that you can't help but feel like it's real. Like they're real. And this is the fight of their lives, and you can feel just how impactful it really is. And it makes you imagine, like, what the fuck if this really happened? What? You don't know. And so, if I wasn't a big enough Marvel fan before the MCU, I'm an even bigger fan now, because of just how well they've done. It took a long time. To think that Avengers Endgame was released only a year after Infinity War is phenomenal. All the vast amount of work that they did on this movie in such a short time is incredible. And it took two directors, not one, but two. The Russo brothers are fucking geniuses in their storytelling. They are just phenomenal. They really are. So before I go any further, for whoever's watching this video, if you haven't seen it yet, spoiler warning. I'm going to give you all about 5 seconds to turn away from this video. This isn't the only spoiler-heavy video about Avengers Endgame. But 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Alright, you've been warned. So essentially, Endgame naturally picks up right where Infinity War left off. I'm not going to go into speculation from what was seen in the trailers, but from what was seen in the trailers, where Endgame picked up at, really chronologically fit with the story. Picked up right after Infinity War, and we see the movie starts at the Barton farm. Because in Infinity War we had Black Widow tell us that Scott Lang, aka Ant-Man, and Clint Barton, aka Hawkeye, after the Sokovia Accords, they were released from the Raft prison and put under house arrest. They took a deal, and they were put under house arrest. We saw that in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and then we see the same security anklet around Clint's ankle, and he's just spending time with his family, having a little picnic outside, and he's teaching his daughter Lila how to shoot a bow and arrow. And it's very heartwarming. But it's like as soon as this movie picks up, I'm like, okay, now the pain of Infinity War is already starting to well up inside me because I know exactly what's going to happen. And he turns his head away to look away from his daughter to call over to his wife saying they're going to come for dinner. And the second he turns back, his daughter is vanished into ash. And he's calling for her, and then he turns back around, he calls for the rest of his family, calls for his wife. And the second he turns his head back again, they're just gone. All of them. His wife and all his kids. Oh my God. Are just fucking gone. Faded into ash, into nothing. Like, as a father, that really... I was already crying. And this movie just fucking started. We're not even 5 minutes in, and I'm bawling like a baby. I'm like, you assholes. Oh, it just fucking hurts. It does. And he's starting to lose it. And he does lose it. You figure out he literally goes off the deep end. Hawkeye goes batshit in Endgame. And so right after that, it's like it literally just cuts to like the rest of the Avengers. You get the opening cinematic, and then it cuts to the rest of the Avengers on Earth, and then also Tony and Nebula, not too far off from Titan, where they fought Thanos after the snap, they're just floating through space. They managed to get as far as they got, and they're just floating in space with food and oxygen and life support running out, and they're on death's door, Tony more so, and Tony looks malnourished. Him and Nebula are getting along pretty well, which is kind of funny to see, especially considering Nebula's character and personality and how much she's gone through, especially since she just lost her sister before the snap. And so Tony is giving a recording, seems like one of many, through his Iron Man helmet to Pepper back on Earth, and he doesn't even know if she's still alive because he has no way of contacting her. He's just praying to whatever he believes in, whatever God. He's just praying that these messages are getting there to her and that she's still alive, that the one person he truly gives enough of a damn about other than himself and is still alive, because he just had to watch pretty much his son, like his dad role model son, Peter, he had to watch him fade away to ash. He truly failed over the course of the entire MCU, and with Thanos and the Mind Stone just manipulating and working Tony down to the nub of his soul. No giggity. Just... it broke him. It's not the only one that absolutely broke, but it broke him. And so, life support systems and everything are running out on their ship, and Tony's on the verge of just kind of, dying from lack of food and water and life support. And right as we think he's about to die, now again in the very opening of the movie, you see a bright light start to appear and fade brighter onto his face. and it's so dazzlingly bright, like as bright as a sun, and he has to shield his eyes, and he looks out, and eventually you see the light energy start to fade, and it's Captain Marvel. Because you see at the end of Captain Marvel, Nick Fury's Captain Marvel pager was transmitting, but then it suddenly stops. And when it stops, they're like, I want to know who was on the other end of that thing, Black Widow says. And then as soon as she turns around, there's Carol Danvers standing right there, and she goes, where's Fury? So you kind of put two and two together. They're like, okay, well, we know where Tony is. We need you to go save him. So Tony's knocking on death's door, but then Captain Marvel shows up just in time to save him. This movie is 3 hours and 2 minutes. If you don't account for the credits, and there's no end credits scene, by the way. This movie is 3 hours and 2 minutes. If you take away the credits, it's maybe 2 hours and 50 minutes. Just about. But it's a 3-hour movie. So the pacing of the plot of this movie doesn't make it feel like it's 5 hours. The only thing that makes you feel, or 5 hours, 3 hours, doesn't make you feel like it's 3 hours long, because the storytelling and the pace of the plot is so expertly done that it grips you right from the beginning, and it doesn't let go. So you can't really tell too much. The only way you tell afterwards is after you get up out of your seat and you're like, oh, yeah. That's really the only way you can tell. So she rescues Tony and Nebula and brings them back to Earth. And Cap shaved his beard off. Tear. And so, for the first time since Civil War, Tony and Cap are reunited. And when the camera pans over, you see Pepper actually did survive. So I'm like, oh, thank God. Like, everyone's breathing a sigh of relief there. Last phase 1 girlfriend standing. So, she survived the snap. And they're just kind of having a powwow back and forth, Tony's just absolutely broken down, and he's in a wheelchair, and he's got an IV hooked up to him, and he's, trying to recover. And he's talking to Cap for the first time since Civil War, and he's had enough, and he's just unloading on Cap, talking shit and all that. It's like we're the Avengers, right? Not the Pre-Vengers. I warned you, God damn it, that this shit would happen and that we would lose, and you told me that we'd do that together too. Like, what the fuck is that even? Like, I told you what we needed, and because of your actions and our actions, we're shit out of luck now. And we don't even know what to do. So, but essentially they all kind of decide, well, we don't even know where Thanos is, so now they're trying to find Thanos. And they've been trying to find him for the last few weeks since the snap. And finally, deep space scans reveal that the same energy signature that was released in the snap appeared again on Thanos' garden world, where he is now living the remainder of his life in peace. Which obviously pisses them off, because they're like, the fact that this motherfucker is still alive and he thinks he can get away with this, we're the Avengers. And Cap just goes, let's go get this son of a bitch. And I'm like, yeah. So they suit up and they go to space. The bulk of the Avengers go to space for the very first time. They arrive at Thanos' garden planet, and he's just there. There's no planetary defenses. There's no weapons of any kind. It's just him there. So they all dive into Thanos' little hut. But even when they show Thanos, they show him walking up the steps into his hut, into his house, and he's limping. Like something's wrong with him. And once you finally see him, his entire left arm and the entire left side of his body it looks like severe burning and scabbing from use of the stones. But all the Avengers dive in and restrain him. And as soon as he's restrained, Thor dives in and cuts his hand off. the gauntlet hand. And I'm like, a lot of people are like, yeah, that's what you should have done in the first place, motherfucker. Cuts the gauntlet off. Rocket picks it up and he turns it over, but the stones are gone. And they're like, what the fuck did you do with them? And he's like, the stones serve no more purpose beyond temptation, so I used the stones to destroy the stones. So if you guys had any hopes of bringing everybody back, haha, fuck you, you can't do it. The work is done. I am inevitable. The purple ball sack reminiscent of his chin on this motherfucker. Come on. And they're like, he's got to be lying. And Nebula goes, my father is a lot of things, but a liar is not one of them. And he goes, oh, daughter, perhaps I was too harsh on you. And before he can utter another word, Thor cuts his head clean off. So in the first 15 minutes of the movie, Thanos is dead. And I'm like, ugh. Well, what the fuck now? Like, what do we do? Like, you needed to keep him alive, maybe, to have some hope of some kind of a plan. And I'm like, wow. Like, in the first 15 minutes, they kill the big baddie? What the hell? Like, where do you go from here? But you can tell that Thor is absolutely just as broken as Tony is. Because he failed just as equally. Instead of throwing Stormbreaker with better aim, instead of killing Thanos the way he should have in Infinity War, he wanted to take in the moment because he was driven by rage and revenge. He wasn't, like I said, none of them were fighting at their best, and none of them were thinking clearly. And so Thor threw the axe directly into Thanos' chest. And instead of ripping it out and cutting his hand off or cutting his head off, Thanos even said, you should have gone for the head, and he didn't, and he snapped. And they're like, what the hell did you just do? And he's like, I went for the head. Like I should have. You know, he didn't say that, but he's like, I went for the head. But he said it really like hopelessly and deliriously, and then he just walks out of the hut. And I'm like, fuck, dude. And then afterwards they cut to black screen, and it's 5 years later, after the snap and after they killed Thanos, which tells you now that everyone has had to now live in a universe and in a world after the snap, and they're just adjusting to life. But obviously the Avengers just can't let it go, and they haven't let it go. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but I'll try to run through this as quickly as I can. And they show Captain America running kind of a support group. And one of the Russo brothers actually makes a cameo in that support group circle in this movie, talking about a date he had with another man, and just talking about how it was going. And Steve is like, that's really great. You know, even after all this, you know, the world is practically, I guess, you know, started fresh, and we got to do something better with it. You know, it's up to us to, you know, be able to move on from this and to actually try to continue to live our lives and make better of this situation than we did before, because essentially now the population has been reduced and the planet is maybe even now starting to heal itself. And he's like, we have to do better. Otherwise, maybe Thanos should have killed all of us. Type of, you know, he's obviously could not be more grounded and realistic about the whole situation. But deep down, he's like, I'm an Avenger. I can't let this shit go, and I know the rest of us can't either. We haven't moved on, and we will never move on from this because it's just so unacceptable. so unacceptable. It just doesn't sit right. It doesn't sit right. You know, after much speculation on my part after Infinity War, I've talked to myself and to my fiance till I've been blue in the face that, you know, if the Infinity Stones and the Gauntlet would have given Thanos that much power, he didn't need to use it to kill. He could have used it to create. Be more bountiful with it. You know, if it gave him the power of a god, gods can destroy, but gods can also create. Instead of wiping out half of all life, create more worlds and more places for people to move on to. Yeah, populations would still grow, but it's like you're not killing, you're creating. Like, if he would have been willing to do that, then obviously we wouldn't have the story that we have. So what I just said there will actually come into play when I describe further into the plot of Endgame. So after that little scene in the support group that Cap is running, we cut to San Francisco in a storage facility, a self-storage facility, and Scott Lang's van that they built the quantum tunnel in, with Hank and Janet at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp, is in the storage facility. And a little rat or mouse walks across the controls for it, activates the quantum tunnel, and brings Scott back from the quantum realm because he got trapped there at the end of Ant-Man and the Wasp after the snap. And for so long I was wondering, how are they going to tie in Ant-Man to the MCU? Because really, up until Civil War, it's like they brought him into Civil War to help fight Cap's cause. But after that, it's like, well, where are they going to go from here? And what they kind of ended up doing with the Ant-Man movies is it's like they told its own centralized story and developed the character, and then tied him into other facets of the MCU in the larger picture kind of after the fact. And that's exactly what they did with Ant-Man and the Wasp, too. So after the events of Ant-Man and the Wasp, they're exploring the quantum realm through the quantum tunnel that they built in the back of that van. Scott's gathering quantum healing particles, and before they can bring him back at the countdown of 5 seconds, there's static on the mic, and then they cut to the outside world, outside the quantum realm, and you see ashes falling to the ground. And the second I saw that, I'm like, no! He's trapped there, son of a bitch! Just again, so impactful. And so just devastating. You know, he's like trapped there now like Janet was for years, and it's like, shit! So, but he comes back in Endgame. At first I thought it was a little bit cheesy, like a rat walks across the controls and he comes back. I'm like, to me, that might be lazy writing. But it's whatever, you know, at least he's back, you know. So he comes back, and he comes back to a world after the snap, 5 years after the snap and after the death of Thanos. Now he's back, and he's looking around like, what in the fuck happened? I think Ken Jeong, if I'm not mistaken, makes a cameo as the self-storage security guard. So if you see Endgame, keep an eye out. He plays the self-storage security guard. I recognize him. It's Ken Jeong. Chow from the Hangover trilogy. Anyway, so he's walking around the city with all of his stuff in a little wagon that he's pulling along. And he's looking around like, what the hell happened? He sees a telephone post with a bunch of missing posters, and he sees a kid pass by him on a bike, and he's like, hey kid, what the hell happened here? And the kid just looks at him like blank expression, like, how the hell do you not know? Like, what world have you been in? And then doesn't say anything and just rides off. So he goes to the memorial site in San Fran of the Vanished, and it's all these marble or granite pillars with all the names of the people who got ashed away in the snap. I'm going to go get a bottle of water. 1 second. Sorry, guys. Alright, I'm back. Sorry. I had to get a bottle of water. So anyway, he's looking at all these granite memorial name slabs, hoping he doesn't see his family or his daughter's name. And when in looking for his daughter's name on the slab, hoping he doesn't find it, he sees his name. He's like, what the hell? Like, so he goes to his ex-wife's house, hoping to find them there, and the only person he finds there is his daughter, but she's now a teenager. And she hasn't seen him for 5 years. And it's such an impactful scene. And he's like, you're so big. Like, I'm just so relieved that you're alive, you know? Again, tears flowing throughout this whole movie. Like, tears and laughter and just, yes! Like, triumphant moments. So we find out that his daughter's alive. And then after that, it cuts back to Black Widow, Natasha, at the Avengers facility. And she's talking to Okoye, Danai Gurira's general character from Black Panther. Her and Carol Danvers and Rocket, and just kind of getting a update on what's going on in their regions, and Rhodey, War Machine. And he gives her an update on situations in like Mexico and other places where there's just like a gang cartel and like gang war body count piling up, and he's like, you know who's doing this, you know it's Clint. Because after his family vanished, he became Ronin. Not only bow and arrow, but like sword and fucking assassin. Like, he's just dealing out death left and right after his family died. And so, you know, Rhodey's like, the kind of stuff he's doing, from what I'm seeing here, it's like, I'm not sure I'd want to find him. Like, maybe we should just leave him be. And she's like, no, you find him and you let me know where he's going to be next. You let me know when you find him where he's going to be. Because I need to find him and I need to save him. Because, you know, he's just too far gone and he needs to be brought back. So after that, Steve shows up. The two of them talk and he's like, you know, I keep telling people to move on from this. You know, and everyone else seems to be able to move on from this, but not us. You know, we can't. And so after he says that, Scott rings the buzzer and he's like, hi, hey, it's me, Ant-Man. Remember a few years ago we were at the airport in Germany? And he's like, is this an old recording? And she's like, it's a live feed. Like, holy shit, he's alive. So then he comes in and he's like explaining to them, okay, does anyone know anything about quantum physics? Has anyone learned anything about quantum physics? And Black Widow goes, only when I want to use it in conversation. Like, it's an anecdote type of thing. So then he starts explaining to them where he's been for the last 5 years. He was like, but that's just it. For you guys, it was 5 years, but for me, it felt more like 5 hours. Like, it was not that as long as it was for you guys. And he goes, and that's because I'm starting to realize that even though Scott doesn't know like a lot about the science aspect of the Pym particles in the quantum realm and the technology that opens that door into that world, he's like, time seems to work differently down there. And I'm thinking, what if we could possibly enter the quantum realm from one point in time and emerge somewhere else at a different point in time? Maybe we could actually find a way to make time travel work to fix this whole fucking situation. So everyone starts banding together again. They start getting everybody together. They find Banner. But now after 5 years, he started asking himself the big questions. He's like, you know, Hulk and I both lost. Like, I lost twice. First, Hulk lost when he got his ass kicked by Thanos in the opening of Infinity War. Then Banner lost when he couldn't transform into the Hulk and help out in battle. Then they both lost when, everyone got snapped away did. And after that, he started thinking, he's like, I've been trying to fight the Hulk, treat him like he was a disease, something to get rid of. Instead, I finally embraced him, and I worked with the technology to combine the best of both worlds. So we see, like, Professor Hulk, the Banner in Hulk's body. And that makes for some pretty, funny jokes and cracks and situations in Endgame. So that was pretty entertaining to see. So now that they're trying to gather up all the members of the Avengers again, first they actually went and saw Tony. Tony had settled down on his own little farm, had a daughter with Pepper, and the relationship between Tony and his daughter Morgan Stark in Endgame is so precious and so just funny to see. I'm pretty sure Robert Downey Jr. is a dad. You can tell just by the interaction between him and the little actress that plays his daughter. It's so cute to see. And so when Steve, Natasha, and Scott show up at his door, and he's like, we think we may have figured out a way to fix this and time travel. And Tony's like, yeah, you don't think people or don't think I've tried to figure that out before? And it's like every time I've tried to figure it out, some other variable, it doesn't work. It's not feasible, So he's like, I can't do it. I finally settled down. I finally have a life. I finally actually moved on from this, surprisingly. And so it's like, if you're not here to talk business, you can stay for dinner or lunch, whatever, if you don't talk about this. Like, I'm done with this. So then they go talk to Hulk, and then afterwards Hulk and I think Rocket go to New Asgard, where the remainder of the people of Asgard have settled, and it's in that town that was introduced in the Thor movies, Tonsberg, Norway. Ironically enough, they settled New Asgard there. And when we get there, we find Thor sitting in a seaside house with Korg and Meek from Ragnarok, sitting, lazing around, playing video games, playing Fortnite. And Thor, they put, I think, like, I was not expecting them to go the direction they went with Thor in this movie. I was not expecting it at all. Thor is an absolute broken, depressed, like, living with his mama kind of mess. Like, if I were still living with my dad, this is how I would fucking look. He's pudged out, not chiseled. He looks like the dude, actually. Ironically enough, my channel being named after The Big Lebowski, which is one of my all-time favorite movies, they made him look like Jeff Bridges, the dude. They made him look like the dude in this movie. And fucking RDJ even makes a crack at him. He's like walking around him and he looks at his other shoulder and he's like, wrong side there, Lebowski. And I'm like, wow. They legit made him look like the dude. He's fat and lazy. He's snacking and drinking himself into a pit. And he's just as broken as the rest of them. He's like, so... But they get him to come along anyway by saying there'll be beer on the ship, He's like, what kind of beer? So they bring him along. They get him to come along. Natasha goes to, I think, Japan, where Clint is slaying out on a cell of Yakuza members. And he's like, the fact that Thanos snapped his fingers and you assholes that are preying on the innocent somehow managed to survive, I have to correct that mistake. So he is killing them all. But Natasha manages to find him and bring him in. So now that they're finally all together, and secretly Tony manages to actually crack the secret behind time travel. So he figures it out, and he's like, well, I could either go and follow this plan through to fruition and correct this, maybe bring everybody back, or I could just drop it all and settle for the life that we've built here with our daughter. And it's a really humbling moment because that is just so human. And I think obviously, if I were in his position, and I am, I have family here, me and my son and my fiance, and I fought so incredibly hard. It really hit me. It really hit me close to home. It really hit me close to home, where he's like, I could just drop all of this and not even touch this and just continue to live out the rest of my days with you two here because you two are my world. And yet another textbook example of how just fucking relatable these characters are. And Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts, he's like, I could just stop right now and forget about all that and just stay here. Because obviously he doesn't want to risk losing them. And he's like, and she goes, me trying to get you to stop Tony is one of my few failures in life. And he's like, will you be able to live with yourself and actually rest knowing that you could have done something and didn't? And so he finally comes in. He's like, I figured it out. I figured out time travel. Let's make a plan. And so they figure out at what points in time in their history where the Infinity Stones were. And you got to try to keep in mind throughout all this, it's like they're basing this off of their Earth years. So at the different points in time in the different movies of the MCU and the MCU history, at what points in time where the Infinity Stones all were. Obviously, the Ancient One had the Time Stone in New York at the Sanctum Sanctorum. And then the Battle of New York, both the Space and the Mind Stone were in the same vicinity because Loki had it in his scepter and he was using the Space Stone to bring Thanos' army in. So that's 3 stones in New York in 2012. And then in 2014, Guardians of the Galaxy, obviously the Soul Stone is on Vormir and the Power Stone is on Morag before Quill goes to steal it. And then the Reality Stone in, I believe, 2013, Asgard and Thor the Dark World. The Reality Stone, aka the Ether, has bonded itself to Jane Foster, and Thor brought her to Asgard to try to help her. And so they figure out where all the stones are, and they build their quantum time tunnel. And so Tony, Ant-Man, Hulk, and Steve Rogers go to 2012 New York, the Battle of New York. They try to keep themselves incognito, and the type of, like, the time travel jokes and cracks about popular history and pop culture with, like, Back to the Future and Quantum Leap and all that, like, and Terminator and all that shit. There's so much social commentary about pop culture and time travel in this movie. It's hilarious to hear some of the jokes. So he's like, so Back to the Future was all bullshit. Like Snack Lane, Scott Lane was like, because Hulk was explaining to him this, like, look, like, think about this. It's like the moment that you travel to a past point in time in your own history, that past then becomes your present, and then simultaneously your present then becomes your past. Like time travel in some ways can be linear, and if you do Like, time is essentially the way he's trying to explain it. He simplifies it, but time really is in a constant state of flux. So whatever happens in one point in time will have effect on the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And there is a butterfly effect with time travel. And even the Ancient One draws the linear timeline. It's like, remove one of these stones. She's explaining to Hulk when he goes to get the time stone from her. Remove one of these stones from any point in time. She specifically is referring to the time stone because it's their chief weapon against their forces of darkness from other realities, from other dimensions. And so it's like, remove one stone from one point in time and completely alter the course of time and history and create an alternate future, just like Back to the Future 2. Just like Back to the Future 2. And so, but also simultaneously, time is in a constant state of flux. So situations and happenings in any point in time are in a constant state of flux, and you try to change one aspect of it, and then something else is going to happen to create something better or worse. And so eventually Hulk gets the time stone from the Ancient One, explaining, look, at one point in the future when Strange becomes Sorcerer Supreme, he gives the time stone willingly to Thanos, and she's like, he wouldn't have done that without a reason. Just like Cap, just like none of them would ever have any, you would never do anything without good reason. And even in Infinity War, he's like, out of 14,605 odds, there was only one where we win. Even after the snap, and after how humbling and devastating that was, there's still this 14,605 to 1 chance that we could still win and rectify the situation here. So, let's do whatever we have to do. And so he's like, I promise you, Hulk gives her his word that wherever we take these stones from, we will return them to the points in time and places that they were taken from, so that way it doesn't cause a complete temporal cataclysm and branching alternate futures and all that shit. So after we're done restoring this in our point in time, in our future, which is technically our present that we're coming from, then we'll return the stones to their points in time. So the Ancient One gives the time stone to Hulk. In trying to get the Mind Stone and the Space Stone, there's actually a really cool scene when Steve, Ant-Man, and Tony are looking at the events after the first Avengers movie, after they capture Loki and are bringing him down through Avengers Tower, which was then Stark Tower at the time. Burp. Excuse me. There's a really funny joke. Tony's looking at Cap from behind the wall incognito, and he's like, God, Cap, I hate to mention that old uniform did absolutely nothing for your ass. And he's like, okay, hey, don't talk. And Scott Lang goes, Ant-Man goes, like, don't talk like that. Come on, Cap, as far as I'm concerned, that's America's ass. Like, he's such a fanboy for Cap, like Coulson was when he was still alive in the first Avengers movie. It was just so hilarious. Like, jokes like that, they keep the seriousness of the whole thing so light and just entertaining. So Cap gets his hands on the scepter after the strike team from Winter Soldier grabs it and is moving it down through the elevator of Stark Tower. And he gets in the elevator with them, kind of recreating the scene from Winter Soldier where they all pile in with him and they're about to start kicking his ass. And he's like, before we get started, does anyone want to get out? So the Russo brothers recreated that scene when he's in an elevator yet again full of Hydra agents, but they don't know that yet in that point in time. So it's all very awesome. It's excellent fan service to the entire MCU. It's excellent fan service to the fans. keeping everything that consistent is just amazing. And so he's like, Secretary Pierce wants me to run point on the scepter. And they're like, well, we didn't get any word about that. He's like, don't worry, it's okay. Trust me. And he leans in closer to Jasper Sitwell, the Agent Sitwell, and he goes, Hail Hydra. And they're like, oh shit, really? Like, we got Cap on our side? Like, how'd that happen? And he just walks out of the elevator with the scepter, and I'm like, that was way too fucking easy. That was way too easy. And so as Cap is walking then through the building with the scepter, he stops short and he looks at something in front of him and he goes, you gotta be shitting me. And it's his past self from the first Avengers movie. Because downstairs in the lobby, in trying to get the Space Stone, the Tesseract, Tony's walking away incognito in a SWAT uniform. He gets knocked out when Hulk swings the lobby door open from taking the stairs, knocks the case open, and Loki in chains takes the Tesseract and disappears through a space portal, so they lose the Tesseract at that point in time. And so they're like, we lost Loki and the Space Stone. But then Captain America from 2012 Avengers, at that point in time, he sees future Steve Rogers, and he goes, I got eyes on Loki. Everyone move on my position. And so Cap ends up battling himself, trying to get out of there with the scepter. And so he fights himself. They fall down a few stories onto another balcony bridge in the building. 2012 Captain is choking his future self out, and in order to try to get him to back off, he goes, Bucky is alive, because he knew in the past that he didn't know that. So he said that, and then his past self lets go, and he's like, what did you just say? And then he punches him in the face, grabs the scepter, and wipes his memory. So he beats himself, because the only one that can beat him is himself. It's kind of funny to see. But he knocks him out, and 2012 Cap is laying on his stomach, knocked out. And after he picks up his shield and the scepter again, he looks down at himself and he goes, that is America's ass. Like, it's so funny. That's my freaking all-time favorite line now from Avengers, from all the movies. Is like, that is America's ass. Like, it's just so funny. So Cap gets the scepter, but they lost the Space Stone. So they have to come up with an alternate plan, and Tony is remembering a point in time where both the Tesseract and more Pym particles, because they only had enough Pym particles for one round trip for all of the members that were going on this mission there and back to get each of the stones and come back to their present day. So they have to figure out a way to get more Pym particles and the Tesseract now that Loki made off with it. So Tony and Steve go to, I think, 1970 to Camp Lehigh, the military camp where Steve Rogers was created in Captain America. Excuse me. And where S.H.I.E.L.D. was founded, and then there was that underground bunker at that military camp. And Tony manages to sneak in, grab more Pym particles, or Captain America manages to grab more Pym particles, and Tony manages to get the Tesseract out of the bunker. But in doing so, Steve realizes that he's in Peggy Carter's office when he takes the Pym particles, and as he's trying to get out of the building, and he sees Peggy in the adjacent office through her window, and he's just standing there looking at her like with such longing. He's like, he hasn't seen her since her older self died peacefully in her sleep in Civil War, and still longing because, you know, they were supposed to be together and that chance was just ripped away from them. And he's had to live with that. And so the fact that he sees her again as she was, as he remembers her, it's just, again, this just another example where this movie just tugs on your heartstrings. That, and when Tony steals the Tesseract from the bunker, where eventually Zola would become computerized, he runs into his dad on the day that he finds out that they're having a baby, that him and his mother are having a baby, and obviously it's Tony. So Tony gets the chance to speak to his father again, since they died. His parents died at the hands of Bucky. Yeah, when he was a Winter Soldier, but it's just so heartwarming. And they get the chance to talk and just trade secrets and advice about parenting and all that stuff. And after they're done talking, before Steve and Tony leave, he gives his dad a hug, and he's like, "Thank you for everything you've done for this country." Like, he didn't want to make it seem weird, but it's like it was his last chance to tell his dad essentially that he loved him without giving away who he was. And then as his father's walking back to his Rolls Royce, and he's like, "Hey, Jarvis, do we know that guy?" Because back in the day, their butler was Jarvis. And that's why Tony made that, AI, and he named it Jarvis. And eventually then Jarvis became Vision. So again, excellent fan service and excellent storytelling. So then after that, meanwhile, because there's so many things going on at once, all of the entire mission and all of the teams that split off into their missions, it's all going on simultaneously. So obviously they're cutting between each of the groups. So then Black Widow, Hawkeye, aka Ronin, and then Nebula and War Machine, Rhodey, they all go to 2014 space. Nebula and Rhodey remain on Morag for the Power Stone to intercept Quill, Star-Lord, to make sure that he doesn't take it. And then Hawkeye and Black Widow go to Vormir to get the Soul Stone. And we end up figuring out that obviously at that point in time, Thanos, Gamora, and Nebula, and Ronan, the Accuser, were all looking for the Power Stone at that point in time. And that shit might be going sideways. Because now both past and present Nebula now exist at the same point in time. Her bionic enhancements end up going crazy and end up like synaptic misfiring and crossing, and both of their consciousness end up kind of merging, both past and present. So through past Gamora, her present day conscience, like good Gamora, ends up merging and projecting and spilling the beans to Thanos at that point in time, and Thanos ends up discovering the whole plan, so now he's got them on their ass. But Thanos is like, he sees the entirety of what happened in their time, and he's figuring out, so at some point in the future, Nebula ends up betraying me. She's with these Avengers, whom I remember from the Battle of New York when I tried invading Earth before. And at some point in the future, I succeed. Wow, like he's figuring that out. He's like, okay, I succeed. And now they're trying to undo something or prevent or undo something that I did in their time. They're trying to undo what I did. So he figures out their plot. He sends past Gamora incognito as good Gamora looks. Her past self, evil Gamora, takes some facial plating and ends up grafting it onto herself to take good Nebula's place as a Trojan horse for when they travel back to their present day through the quantum tunnel, the time tunnel. And so that ends up happening. Meanwhile, Hawkeye and Black Widow end up traveling to Vormir and end up discovering Red Skull. And they both end up figuring out, okay, what's gonna have to happen in order for one of us to get the Soul Stone. So they both... I mean, in the end, I wasn't really too sad about this, but the fact that the Soul Stone had to be what it had to be, and the fact that someone had to sacrifice something or someone, obviously someone that they loved the most, a soul for a soul, like it was in Infinity War when Thanos did truly love Gamora as a daughter, and he sacrificed her for the Soul Stone. That really pissed me off. Pissed a lot of people off. Really pissed off my fiance. And it's just so heartbreaking. Because Clint feels guilty, like, look, my family's gone. And after all the people I've slaughtered, as bad as they were, I don't think I deserve to live anymore. So he's trying to sacrifice himself. Meanwhile, Natasha's like, you know, the only thing I have is the Avengers. I don't have any family. I don't have anything I would be leaving behind besides you guys. So if I have to sacrifice myself for the good of the team and those that would come back if we can undo the snap. And also she knew that if they were able to succeed in their mission and undo the snap, she's thinking, your family's going to come back. You'll have something to go back to. I'm leaving nothing behind, so ultimately I have to make the sacrifice. They both end up hanging by a... They both end up hanging by a cord off the side of the cliff on Vormir. And Clint's holding on to her, trying to save her, like... And she's just like, let me do this. It's okay. You know, you can let me go. She pushes herself out of his grip and she sacrifices herself. Black Widow dies. Black Widow dies. Everyone thought that she would have been long dead by now, that Thanos would have killed her or something. Or she survived all the way up until this point to sacrifice herself for the good of everyone. Which is it's noble as all hell. Because that's exactly what Captain America did. He laid down his own life to make sure that that the world would be saved at the end of World War II. So Black Widow dies, and Hawkeye ends up walking away with the Soul Stone. And obviously that's like one of the few, like those that died before the snap can't be brought back, especially whoever ended up being sacrificed for the Soul Stone. They can't be brought back. They can't be. As unfortunate as it is. So, Black Widow ends up dying. Clint gets the Soul Stone. And then, meanwhile, on Asgard in the 2013 from Thor: The Dark World, Rocket and Thor go to Asgard to extract the ether from Jane. Rocket's got like a little probe needle. He's like, I'm going to go stick Sleeping Beauty with this thing, get the stone, and get the fuck out of Dodge. And Thor is just like terrified and pussying out. Is like, I can't do this. I'm just going to go sit quietly and drink in the corner. Like, he's having a tough time coping. And he finally gets the chance to talk to his mother, Frigga, again, before, like, on the day that she's supposed to die. And she finally talks some sense into him. He's like, you're not the Thor that I remember, are you? You're from the future. Like, I can see why you're here. And she ends up just giving him a talk, and he's like, you know, like, you are truly great, you know, and you are a lot of things, and unfortunately, yes, you are a failure, and you're acting like a failure right now. But it's like the measure of ourselves is not best weighed by who we're supposed to be. You know, we're at our best by how well we succeed at being who we are, who we really truly are, instead of being who we're meant to be, being who we're supposed to be, and who and what we're responsible for, by just succeeding the best we can at being who we truly are. To kind of try to give him a bit of a pep talk and pick him up off his feet, because he's in a hole. He's in a hole and he needs to try to dig himself out. He needs to try to pull himself up. And so he has that talk with his mother, and so then Rocket ends up comes running out. He extracted the ether from Jane, and he's running around the corner, and he's like, they're about to travel back through the time tunnel. He's like, and Thor goes, wait, before we go, I have to see. He thrusts out his hand, and his mother goes, sometimes it takes a second. And all of a sudden, you kind of hear it before you see it, but Mjolnir, his hammer, before it gets destroyed in Thor Ragnarok, Mjolnir appears in his hand. It comes rushing to his hand. He's like, wow, really, even after all this, I'm still worthy of it. And that really, like, puts the pep right back in his step, you know. And so he's like, I'm still worthy. Now, it's like, you know, you guys are, and I'm like, I'm trying to accept the laws of the laws of what I know to be time travel, like the rules of time travel. I have my own mindset about what that entails, and so it's like you're taking Mjolnir from your past, even though it's going to be destroyed in the future, but then what if your past self needs Mjolnir? Like, you just stole Mjolnir. Like, Thor could always use another weapon, or he could go to Nidavellir, I guess, and have another weapon forged for him. If he really wanted to, he could. So, I mean, to me, it seemed like there might have been a little bit of a plot hole, the fact that he stole Mjolnir from the past again. But he took Mjolnir, and they traveled back through the time tunnel. So they all eventually end up succeeding in their missions, but Thanos again sent evil Nebula, past Nebula, as a Trojan horse. He ended up taking their time traveling, good Nebula's time traveling equipment and whatever Pym particles, and I think what ended up happening, like if I had to guess, because like I said, they said they had enough Pym particles for one round trip each. So Thanos, and it's not really explained too much in depth, but one, he's got his Black Order, he's got Ebony Maw, and Thanos himself is actually like a genius. Like, he's highly intelligent, and he is a genius. And he's got the right people and the right technology if he wanted to. So, and it was kind of explained in an interview by the Russo brothers too recently that Thanos took the time technology and the Pym particles from good Nebula. He reverse engineered it, made more, so that he could bring himself, his ship, and Gamora and good Nebula along with him on his ship to the Avengers present day, come crashing through the time portal. But that happens after they all travel back to the present. They got all the Infinity Stones. They assemble them all in a nanotech Iron Man gauntlet. And Hulk ultimately ends up being the one to put it on, because he's like, the radiation that it's emitting, the energy that it's emitting is mostly gamma. And it's like I was the one who was supposed to put this on. It's almost like I was meant for this. And really, at that point, Hulk was probably the only one strong enough, capable of actually wielding it for long enough to reverse snap. So at this point now, there was the snap that vanished half of all life. And now there is the reverse snap. Okay. That brought everyone back. It did. Everyone comes back. Because as soon as he snaps the gauntlet, it almost doesn't hold together fully. He snaps the gauntlet and it deteriorates and just starts shredding Hulk's arm. So the second he snaps, it falls off of him and he passes out. But then all of a sudden you hear birds chirping outside the window. At that moment of the snap, Thanos' ship ends up crashing through the time tunnel and destroying their time machine. After the reverse snap, you hear birds chirping outside the window and you see Hawkeye's phone ringing and it's his wife. Like, it fucking worked. But then, right at that moment of relief and utter triumph that their mission was a success, Thanos' ship just starts raining missiles and fucking hellfire and destroys their facility. So now it's all-out war. Now they have to deal with Thanos again. They end up having to fight him again after they just killed him in their present day. They have to deal with now his past self, which was practically Thanos in his prime. Like, Thanos was in his prime. Like, in Infinity War, he's a conquest. He's essentially like conquest, conqueror Thanos. He's a conquistador. Conquistador Thanos, if you want to call it that. But past Thanos, when he was first searching for the Infinity Stones, like, he had a plan, but then he finally officially started his search once they found out that the Power Stone was on Morag. 2014 Guardians of the Galaxy Thanos is Thanos, like, in his prime. In his prime. So Avengers facility ends up getting completely leveled. Hawkeye is in the lower levels in the tunnel trying to fight his way out and run away from the Chitauri aliens that are now chasing him. He ends up making it out, but ends up getting stopped short when evil Nebula ends up grabbing the gauntlet. And he thinks it's good Nebula until she reveals she touches her comm unit and he's like, "Father, I have the gauntlet, I have the stones." And then good Nebula and Gamora end up coming in after they had a little talk, like, in the future, what happens, like, we try to kill each other several times, like, I try to kill you several times, but in the long run we end up realizing that it's useless and we end up becoming friends and even sisters. Like, there is some good in our future. And so Gamora picks her up, and they end up running into past evil Nebula. He's like, "You don't have to do this." And he's like, he'll never let me have a choice. Like, he'll never let me be a better version of myself. He'll never let me betray him. Like, I have to do this, otherwise I will die, or I'll end up in eternal torture. So good Gamora ends up killing her past self, which, yet again, like, the traditional laws of time travel, it's like, okay, you just killed your past self, but wouldn't that wipe you from existence? But not necessarily, because, like Hulk had kind of simplified, explained earlier, like, once you travel to the past, that then ends up becoming your present, and simultaneously your present ends up becoming your past. So technically, if you killed your past self, that wouldn't wipe you from existence, because you would still technically then exist at that point in time, because time is in that much of a constant state of flux, to where then when you travel to that point in time in the past, that ends up becoming your reality. You then exist at that point in time in that place. So that is actually, and it's an interesting way of looking at things, because then it kind of puts an alternate twist on the rules of time travel. So this movie did really try to, since it is technically a time travel kind of movie and plot, they were trying to put their own in simplified terms, their own twist on time travel. And they did it successfully. So it kind of explains away some of the plot holes that might have come up in the movie. And believe you me, nerds like me were trying to find plot holes and debunk certain theories and all that shit. But they do a good job of telling the story in a way that it's like there's not really any plot holes. So, so then they end up making it out of the rubble. Captain America, Tony, and Thor end up walking out and seeing Thanos sitting there. And they're like, well, now here he is again, but he doesn't have the stones. And there's like, Thor goes, good, let's keep it that way. So they're getting ready to battle Thanos again, just the three of them at this point. So they're all battling him, and just it's some of the like the action sequences and the fight scene in the grand finale of this movie. There is just so much going on, but it is so artfully, masterfully, beautifully done. Like it's some of the best action fight sequences I've ever seen, and it is so impactful and so emotionally charged that you cannot look away. It grips you, and it's like they're trying desperately to fight him, and it's like ultimately, like between the three of them and Thanos is wielding this like dual-bladed helicopter staff, so wicked, that acts like a fucking boomerang. He ends up knocking out Cap and knocking out Iron Man. And Thor is now yet again battling him with Stormbreaker, the axe in one hand, and Mjolnir in the other. And just desperate, all-out fight of their life, trying to kill this motherfucker again. Thanos ends up getting Thor on the ropes, Thor ends up summoning Stormbreaker while Thanos has him in an arm lock and a chokehold, pinned up against a piece of rubble. And Thor ends up trying to summon Stormbreaker, but Thanos snatches it midair, mid-path, and starts pressing it to Thor's chest like he's going to kill him. Like the same spot where Thor threw the axe into his chest before. And Mjolnir's sitting in a pile of dirt. And so Thanos is now trying to kill Thor, and the axe is starting to go into Thor's chest. And then all of a sudden you see Mjolnir start to lift off the fucking ground. And it flies, hits Thanos in the fucking head. And you see, and the camera pans, and it's like, oh my fucking god. I was like, I'm cheering. I have such a sheer expression of just sheer awe and joy and tears and on my face. Like, it's just, Mjolnir lifts off the ground as Thor is about to get killed, and Mjolnir flies past, hits him in the head, and enters the hand of Captain fucking America. Like, like he was worthy, and up until this moment was the right moment, was the perfect fucking moment for him to hold that hammer. And Thor looks at him, he goes, I knew it. Because in Age of Ultron, when they're all trying to lift the hammer, like, he nudges it a bit, and the look on Thor's face is like, is he gonna lift it? Like, holy shit. But Captain America summons Mjolnir to his hand, and he just starts going off with it so hardcore. he's pulling off hammer shield combos. Like, he throws his shield, Thanos deflects it, and then he throws Mjolnir, hits the shield, and creates a sonic shockwave that staggers Thanos, and he's summoning lightning with it. Like, oh my fucking god, like, Captain America is kicking ass for a brief shining moment with Mjolnir until Thanos kind of, gets the better of him, and he starts, he ends up getting Cap on the ropes again, and then he ends up getting Cap on the defensive, and Cap's holding up a shield, and Thanos is swinging his blade and actually taking chunks out of Cap's shield until he eventually just creates half a shield for Cap. He literally cuts away half of Cap's shield and literally punches him like 100 feet across the battlefield. And now Cap is like in pain now. Thor and Iron Man are still kind of knocked out and down for the count. Not dead, but down for the count. And so Cap is now the last one left standing. And he ends up getting back up onto his feet. And Thanos, meanwhile, is talking. He's like, I just want you to know, in all my years of conquest and battle, and after everything I've done, and in half of civilizations I've already wiped away across the universe, I have to tell you, I've never took any pleasure in it, in what I did and what I've done. Never used to, and I never have. And he's like, but right now, here in this moment, knowing what I know, I have to tell you, I'm going to enjoy this. Like, I'm going to enjoy killing you fucking Avengers. Knowing what I know now, I know what I have to do. To seeing the fact that those of you that are left are unwilling to let go of the past and move on with your lives and make better lives. Like, essentially build better from the ashes of your defeat. Seeing that now that there will still be those of you left that will not let go and that will still try to undo the work that I've done. I'm going to kill all of you Avengers, and I'm going to, from blood and from ash, rebuild a better, more grateful world with as much as they need. Like, I'm going to essentially become a benevolent god and create life and create better life. Like, instead of killing, I'm now going to create. Which is what I mentioned earlier. Like, he could have just done that from the get-go, but he's still like a fucking, a warrior. He's like, I'm going to eliminate those of you that would seek to harm that reality that I'm now deciding that I'm going to create. And then I'm going to do that now. And so Cap is the last one standing on the battlefield, and he's got half a shield, and his leather strap is loose on his arm. He gets back up onto his feet, and Thanos summons his army, like his invading ship, and the same ship that we saw at the end of Thor Ragnarok in the end credits and in Infinity War. He summons his ship, and he summons his Chitauri army, and it's marching across, it's rampaging across toward the battlefield. And Cap is the sole standing, just the sole survivor standing. And he stands up and he tightens his shield, and he's like, I'm ready to go out swinging. And he starts taking a few steps forward, and then all of a sudden you hear he's ready to face down this entire army alone. Like, he's not gonna give up till his last fucking breath, because that's who he fucking is. That's who he is. Last soldier standing. And then you hear static come over his earpiece, and it's a faded voice at first, but then all of a sudden you hear, "Hey Cap, can you hear me? Are you there?" And it's Sam Wilson, Falcon. It's Falcon. And he goes, "Sam?" And then you hear Sam say, "On your left." from fucking Winter Soldier. From Winter Soldier, the opening of the movie where they're running and he keeps passing Sam by like on your left, and it's just excellent fucking fan service. It's so fucking amazing. This movie is one of the best damn movies I've seen in a long time. Like, for a long time, like, being as big of a movie buff as I am, not just with superhero movies, but, you know, all movies. Like, for a long time now, especially in the past at least 5 years, I feel like there have been at least a few superhero movies that I feel deserve a fucking Oscar nod. At least. Logan was one of them, the last Wolverine movie that they did. I felt that deserved an Oscar nod, personally. So, it's just... Sam, over the intercom in his earpiece says, "On your left," and then you see a sling ring portal open up. Falcon comes flying out, and then Black Panther, and then Spider-Man comes swinging through the fucking portal, like, and then you see dozens and dozens of portals open up. The Black Panther, Shuri, Falcon, Spider-Man, and the armies of Wakanda come marching out of one portal. Then you see another one open up, and then Scarlet Witch, and Bucky, and everyone, and then Doctors, and then from Titan, the Guardians of the Galaxy, Groot, Drax, Mantis, Star-Lord, and literally everyone, all the heroes and the armies that got snapped out of existence are back. And it's such a surreal moment, because we know at this point that the reverse snap worked. But it's like we don't know for sure if it worked exactly how they planned, if literally everyone that got snapped away is back, until everyone that got snapped away, all the heroes, all the armies that got snapped, come back. Doctor Strange is opening dozens of portals, and then sorcerers, wizards, Wong, Doctor Strange, everyone, all coming through these portals onto the battlefield. Like, I was just crying and laughing at the same fucking time. Because, seriously, one of the most epic and beautiful cinematic moments that I've ever seen in a movie. Ever. And once everyone finally shows up on the battlefield, Cap finally gets to say his signature line, the line from the comics, the line that got cut short at the end of Age of Ultron. He says, "Avengers." He summons Mjolnir to his hand again, and he looks across the battlefield and he goes, "Assemble." And I swear to God, me and everyone in the theater just screamed a unifying, "Fuck yeah!" Like, cheering our heads off in the theater. I'm sorry, but it's like, if you're going to see this movie, if you're a quiet moviegoer and you like the traditional, you know, be quiet and enjoy the movie, I'm sorry, but you're just not going to fucking get that, because you're going to have more than half the theater screaming and cheering their heads off in this movie and crying, especially huge fanboys like me. You're just going to have to deal with it if you're going to go and see this movie. You're going to have to deal with it. And so the final climactic battle takes place, and eventually, through the outcome of the battle, meanwhile, while practically the entirety of the movie is going on, Captain Marvel is taking care of matters across the galaxy. She's not on Earth. I really wish Captain Marvel would have had a bigger role in this movie, but they didn't. Not until, like I said, in the very beginning and in the very end, she shows up. She really didn't have that big of a role in this movie. And understandably, Hulk didn't do a lot of fighting at all. He played a critical role in the movie, but because he'd used the gauntlet, he was kind of disabled a little bit. He was injured, so he didn't fight at all in the final battle. So, but Ant-Man became Giant Man again, and he was wreaking havoc, and there was just so much going on screen that it's like your eyes can't possibly keep track of it all. It's so overwhelming to watch. It's so overwhelming to watch, but it's so epic. It's the most epic cinematic happening in history. So the climactic battle takes place, and meanwhile, they're like, we have to get the stones back to the points in time that they were taken from. And so Ant-Man and Wasp go to the van. It's lying in the middle of the battlefield. They have to go and try to repair the one quantum tunnel that they have to try to get the stones back. Meanwhile, then Thanos is then trying to make a grab for the stones. Captain Marvel ends up kind of coming in and just towards the end of the battle and destroying Thanos' ship. She takes the gauntlet from Peter, and they end up playing a giant game of hot potato with the gauntlet and the stones, trying to get him to the quantum tunnel so they can make sure that Thanos doesn't get the stones, and they return the stones to where they were taken from, when and where. And so ultimately, Thanos ends up getting his hands on the gauntlet again. He puts it on. Captain Marvel makes a dive for him, restraining him, and she's bending his fingers back. He pops the Power Stone out into his other fist, charges himself up, and KOs Captain Marvel. And, you know, when Doctor Strange and everyone first came back, he's like, so, 14 million to 1 odds. Tell me this is it. Tell me this is it, and this is where we win. And he's like, if I tell you how this is going to happen, if I tell you what happens, it won't happen. Like, if I tell you how this plays out, then it won't happen. And ultimately, Iron Man was the one that was closest to Thanos on the battlefield. After Thanos knocks Captain Marvel out for the count, Iron Man comes in, swinging and punching and grabbing his arm and restraining him again. And then, as he's holding on to Thanos' gauntlet hand, he looks over at Doctor Strange, and Doctor Strange is holding back the water from the lake so the battlefield doesn't get flooded. He's holding it back with a magical restraining spell. And he looks over at Doctor Strange, and Strange looks at him, and he's just like, he holds up one finger like, one chance. Like, this is the one chance. And they both knew. And in that moment, Tony realized. So then, you don't see it right away, but Tony was holding on to Thanos' hand long enough to do something before Thanos punched him away. And Thanos goes, I am inevitable. And he snaps his fingers, but there's just an empty metallic snap sound. And nothing happens. And he's like, what the fuck? Like, nothing's happening. And then he looks at Iron Man, and Tony, with his helmet off, holds up his right hand, and you see the stones with the nanotech Iron Man armor. Like, he managed to snatch the stones right off the gauntlet when Thanos didn't realize it. And the stones form on his gauntlet, and immediately the energy surges through him. And he looks at Thanos and goes, and I am Iron Man. And snaps. So we have the snap, the reverse snap, and Tony's snap. And when Tony snapped his fingers, all of Thanos' forces, his minions, his entire army faded to ash. And Thanos sat down in utter defeat, nothing to say as he flaked away to ash to nothingness. And they had won. They'd brought everyone back that was snapped away, and they had finally defeated the architect behind this entire MCU, all of it. Like the one true tyrant, they defeated him. Thanos is dead for a second fucking time. A second time. In the same movie. But we know from the past movies that mortals were not meant to wield the power of the stones, that mortal people were just not powerful enough to wield the stones and survive. And when Tony wielded the stones and he did his snap, it put him in a catatonic state, and it killed him. And then he had a last moment to a face-to-face with Peter. He's like, Mr. Stark, we did it, we won. Everyone's back, and the bad guys are dead, they're gone. Like, we did it, we won. He's like, and it's recreating yet again the moment in Infinity War when Tony failed because he had lost the kid. He had lost what was like a son to him. He lost essentially, his son, in a sense. And now they're recreating the scene again in Endgame, where now Tony's the one dying and not him. And Pepper comes in and she's like, it's okay now, you did it. You can rest now. Like, you saved us all. So, as sad, as heartbreaking and sad as it is that Tony Stark, that Iron Man, at the end of all of this, at the end of 11 years of movies, 11 years of cinematic history, as sad as it is that he is now dead, I can't think of a more appropriate way for this to end. There's still going to be Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. There's still going to be more movies in the future. The most recent that we know of that kind of spoiled the fact that Spider-Man was going to come back was Spider-Man Far From Home, is coming out, I think, in June or July of this year. But the fact that this all began with Iron Man 1 and now it ended with Iron Man, that after all of this, he made everything, he saved the day, that Iron Man saved the day in the end, that he single-handedly vanquished evil. And even the second time I saw it, I was still crying just as hard. Because for me, it was the same as Logan. When Logan died at the end of that movie, it was just as sad, and it was just as impactful. And yet now again, with Iron Man dying, so. And then there's a big, they have a big funeral back at their house, at their little slice of heaven, back at Tony's house, and their little corner of the woods where he had settled down with his wife and daughter. They end up playing a last little hologram of Tony explaining, giving a last little speech and last little, before they went on their mission. Like a final farewell. and they have a funeral for him, and there's a wreath of flowers that they all send floating off into the middle of their lake, across their lake at their house. And inside it is the placard with his first arc reactor that he made in that cave all those years ago, that Pepper framed, proof that Tony Stark has a heart, floating across the lake on flowers. And then the camera shot of all of them, every single character in the MCU besides Black Widow, and Vision, essentially. Even the little kid from Iron Man 3 that he ends up meeting in that cold winter town in Tennessee, played by Ty Simpkins. Even that kid showed up to fucking Tony Stark's funeral. It ends up panning across all the characters standing there in mourning together. And it ends on the last shot of Nick Fury standing on the front porch as they all look out across the lake for his funeral. And then after that, it cuts to a shot of Happy Hogan, played by Jon Favreau. Jon Favreau directed, I think, the first 2 Iron Man movies, and he cameoed, he plays Happy Hogan. Tony's head of security. Forehead of security. And then he sits down next to his daughter, Morgan Stark, and he just sits next to her trying to comfort her. He kind of wraps his arm around her. He's like, "How you doing, sweetie?" And she's like, "Well, I'm hungry." "Yeah." And he's like, "I want a cheeseburger." And he goes, "Your dad loved cheeseburgers." And again, that's an homage to the first Iron Man movie after he gets back from the cave. He's like, "Now that I'm back, first, there are 2 things I want to do. I want an American cheeseburger, and I want to call a press conference." So again, homaging to the first Iron Man movie. He's like, "Your dad loved cheeseburgers. I'm going to get you all the cheeseburgers you want." Like every kid wants to hear that, but in her moment of mourning, having Happy say that to her was just so touching, so heartwarming, and it just, again, amidst all the sadness, it just makes you laugh. Because you got to find the humor in it all. Otherwise, it's just too depressing. So then, as if that wasn't touching and saddening, and as if that wasn't enough fan service to the people watching this movie and to the fans of these movies and these characters and the comics and all of it, as if that wasn't enough grade A fan service, the last scene of this movie ends with Hulk sending Captain America back through their time tunnel to return the stones to the point and places in time where they were taken from, to complete the mission, to see it through to the end. So he looks at Sam and he looks at Bucky, and he goes to Bucky, and again, homaging back to the first Captain America movie. He looks at Bucky and he's like, "Don't do anything stupid till I get back." And then Bucky looks at him and smiles and he goes, "How can I? You're taking all the stupid with you." And he pats him on the shoulder. He's like, "It's going to be okay, Buck. It's going to be okay. Finally, it's going to be okay. Like, everything's going to be okay." So he gets sent to the quantum tunnel through time to put all the Infinity Stones back where they took them from. And as soon as Hulk is getting ready to bring him back, he goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and he tries bringing him back, but nothing happens. And he goes, they're like, Sam looks at him and goes, "What's happening? Like, bring him back." He's like, "I don't know what happened. He blew way by his timestamp." and they're trying to bring him back, and then all of a sudden you see Bucky look at something in the distance, and he goes, "Hey, Sam, look." And they're looking at something in the distance, and then there's a man sitting on a stone bench off in the distance at the edge of the lake of the Avengers facility, staring across the lake. And Sam walks over to the bench to who's sitting there, and he looks at the man sitting there, and he goes, "Cap, is that you?" And it's old Steve Rogers, old man, like in his 90s, as old as Peggy would be before she died. It's old Steve Rogers sitting there with his shield in a little zip-up circular case. He's like, "Hey, Sam." And Sam goes, "What happened?" And he's like, "Well, after I put the stones back where they were, I decided to take a page out of Tony's book, settle down, have a life. The life that he never got to have." And again, it's like a mirror image of Tony. It's like the life that Tony was trying to have but kept getting wrapped up in being an Avenger and never getting the chance to settle down because he was just he had to be a part of the bigger picture like the rest of them. He's like, settle down, have a life, like the life he never got to have, the life that he wanted to have with Peggy after the war. He's like, after I put the stones back, it's like at first I had to watch this movie a second time to get a run through of like the entire plot and to make sure that there were no plot holes. And so Cap did succeed in putting all the supposedly he succeeded in putting all the stones back where they were, or at least back in a safe place enough to where no alternate timelines or futures or alternate realities would ensue. Really, I think the only one they probably would have had to absolutely put back was the Time Stone. They could have just returned that to the Ancient One. And I'm pretty sure they probably would have just been able to do whatever the hell they wanted with the rest of the stones, because really I think that was only the most important one. But supposedly he succeeded in putting the stones back. But afterwards, he traveled to a point in time after the war, found Peggy again, and he settled down with her, and he decided to just, after all of it, just settle down with the woman of his dreams, the love of his life, and just had a life. And he's like, "Do you want to tell me about her?" And he goes, "No, I don't think I will. Like, I just want to keep this one for myself. Finally, like, can I just fucking have this to myself?" And Cap, he's like, "Man," Sam goes, "Man, it's going to be really hard to have to live in a world without Captain America." And he's like, "Speaking of that," and he unzips the circular case and takes out his shield. And then he looks at Sam and he holds it up and he goes, "Try it on." And so Sam takes the shield and he holds it up, he puts it on, he straps it to his arm, and he looks down at it and he's like, he goes, "How does it feel?" And he's like it belongs to someone else. And Cap goes, "That's because it does." And Sam goes, "I'll do my best." And then Cap goes, "That's why it belongs to you." So, you heard it here first. 2019, hashtag Captain Falcon. So from now on, it's going to be Falcon Punch and Falcon Kick. So Cap passes the torch, passes the mantle of Captain America to Sam Wilson. Because in the comics, the mantle of Captain America, when Cap dies, Cap ends up dying, in the comics, ends up getting passed on to Sam Wilson, and then I think eventually Bucky as well. So And then the final scene of Endgame is just Steve and Peggy living in their own house, slow dancing, finally having their dance that they were supposed to have in the first Captain America. Just slowly holding each other and dancing in their living room, just enjoying the fact that they can now finally be together. And the music that is playing on their record player is the same kind of slow dancing, like jazz music. Almost, I don't think it's jazz music, but it's the same music that Nick Fury was playing in Steve's apartment in Winter Soldier after he got ambushed. It's the same music, and they're just standing there slow dancing to it, and then that's the end of the movie. So everything came full circle, and everything was just given a finality, and closure. And after all that, after 10 years of all of this, I still can't wait to see what's next. So, Spider-Man Far From Home comes out this summer, June or July, I believe. I think it's either or. So I can't wait to see that. There are still going to be more Marvel movies. There's still going to be a cinematic universe now after Endgame, after all of it. There's still going to be more. So, if after these 10 years, if these movies haven't made you a fan of Marvel, then I don't know what will, especially after Endgame. I'm going to be holding on to this one for a while, and I can't wait to own Endgame. I can't wait to complete the collection because I own all of it now, and I'm going to own Endgame when it comes out. So this has been my review and full run-through of all of Avengers Endgame. Like I said, the only thing I kind of wish they would have done in Endgame is had Captain Marvel have a bigger part to play. She really didn't do a lot in this movie. She played enough of a key part in all of it, but again, she was only there at the beginning and only there at the end of the movie. So, but if she does end up getting more movies in the future, it'll be exciting to see what they do with her character. So, it'll be exciting to see where they go from here. So, also, one last thing that I before I forget. Thor, at the end of everything, he ends up passing the torch of being a monarch. He ends up passing the torch of ruling the people of Asgard to Valkyrie. Valkyrie ended up surviving. He passes the torch to Valkyrie to rule the people of Asgard in his place, while Thor fucks off with the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Asgardians of the Galaxy. So at the end of the movie, you see Quill searching for Gamora because she kind of went AWOL, I guess, after the events of Endgame, and he's searching for her on a computer, you see. And then, so Thor ends up kind of joining the Guardians of the Galaxy. So I think there's supposed to be a Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with Thor and all of them. I think that's it. I think that's everything. I think I covered all my bases with the plot and everything. So that's it. That's everything. And so I can't wait to see what's next. In the meantime, guys, I'm going to keep bringing you excellent gaming videos. This upcoming Tuesday, I'll upload another Kingdom Hearts 3 video. Still got a long way to go in that game, and also I am still on a very long quest to obtain the Ultima weapon in that game, so that's going to be fun. And it'll be awesome to achieve that. I want to thank everyone that is a subscriber, a supporter, and a fan of my channel. Those of you out there, all my 126 subscribers. So, I do this for fun because it's something that I love, and I love sharing my opinion, as you guys know and can tell, and I love to talk. So, this has been my review, an opinion and synopsis of the entire MCU, essentially, and Avengers Endgame. So, thank you all, again, so much for watching. My name is I'm the Dude 5. This is I'm the Dude Games. Please subscribe to my channel. Click that bell icon to get notifications from my channel. Like this video as well as any others of mine that you may enjoy. I'll provide a link in the description of this video as well to my Twitter. Follow me on Twitter. You'll get notifications when I'm about to upload and when I do upload. So I want to thank you all so much for watching, guys. As always, stay classy. I will see you all out there.